Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Joustra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be talking culinary magic, must-have herbs for your home kitchen garden. And I'm talking to Lauren Kurtz, who has a PhD in plant science from the University of Connecticut. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Before we get started, do you mind introducing yourself in a bit more detail?
Yes, absolutely. So like you said, my name is Lauren. I just finished my PhD in plant science from the University of Connecticut just this past December 2023. So fresh out of grad school. I live in Massachusetts. Just moved house a few days ago, so still settling in. But I'm really passionate about ecological horticulture. And I recently started a new position at the University of Connecticut as an invasive species outreach specialist. And I mostly work with invasive plants and aquatic invasive plants specifically.
That sounds amazing. And congratulations both for your new job and for finishing your PhD. Does that make you a doctor?
Yes.
We'll call you Dr. Kurtz then.
Sure. Thank you. You can call me Lauren.
Thank you. I find it a bit awkward to use doctor, I think, in social events.
Me too.
So we're going to move to a section called Have You Met Lauren, where we get to know you through some of your favorite things. And the first thing I'd like to know is, what is your favorite book?
So the book that I've read most repeatedly is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I really like that book. It's just really fun. It's not that fun, but it's just a great story. My favorite author is John Steinbeck, so I really like almost any book that he wrote. I just finished East of Eden, really good. I love Grapes of Wrath. I love Travels with Charlie. Those are all Steinbeck novels. He's my favorite author by far.
And why is he your favorite author?
I don't know. I just really like his writing style. I think I just will read like the first paragraph of any of his novels and I'm immediately sucked in. So I just think he's a really good storyteller. And I think he writes a lot about agriculture and during the Great Depression too, in California, mostly Salinas Valley. And I just think that I'm fascinated by stories about agriculture and people that live that lifestyle.
That's true. I haven't really thought about books about agriculture. I guess it's always been a side thing in the books that I've read, maybe they're farmers, but then they leave the farm immediately.
Yeah, I really like, I just like the struggles and just, that lifestyle of living off the land.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess very relevant to you as well.
Yeah, yes.
And have you watched any movies recently that you enjoyed?
I'm kind of picky when it comes to movies. I don't like to watch very long movies. I think sometimes like if it's over 2 hours, I just can't really watch them. They just get too long for me. I did recently watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for the first time, which is kind of a odd movie, but I enjoyed it. Another good story. I really like movies by Wes Anderson. So The Darjeeling Limited is my favorite movie that he made. And then I really like The Grand Budapest Hotel as well. It's really fun.
Yeah, I love just the visuals, even if you can't follow the storyline, which, I think you can, but it's just fun to watch the beautiful images that he creates.
I agree. Yeah, sometimes you have to watch them more than once to really understand what he's doing. But I really agree. I like the art that goes into his filmmaking.
And do you listen to any podcasts?
Yeah, so I just recently started listening to this one, so that's very cool. I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I added it to my queue. Um,
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. The Dishing on Julia podcast is one that I like that I just started listening to. There's a new show called Julia. I think it's on HBO, and the podcast goes over episodes of the show and interviews different people from the show, and it's really a good one. I really like news podcasts, like The Daily from the New York Times is really good. On Point from NPR is pretty good. This American Life, I listen to a lot of podcasts.
I was going to say, you certainly do listen to a lot of podcasts and like a lot of variety as well. It's not just one type.
Yeah, I have a long commute, so I listen to a lot of podcasts on my commute.
It's good. It's good. Good way to keep you occupied.
Yes, keeps it interesting.
And do you have a role model?
Well, I guess building off the podcast I listen to, I really like Julia Child. So I've just finished that show. The movie is really good. If you're not familiar, she's a chef and did a TV show on public television. I think it was like in the 60s or 70s in Boston area. And I think for her time, she was just a really brave person and a good like female role model. And she likes cooking and eating. So I appreciate that in a person. And she's not ashamed of it. So I like that about her.
Yeah, I think I had another guest as well who talked about that TV show and about Julia as well. So obviously she made a huge impact on people, is very, very much a role model. So thank you for sharing. And have you like completed any courses that have inspired you?
Yes. So just finished grad school. I finally finished I'm no longer a student. I can't be a student anymore. So I'm just, but I do love taking classes. I love learning. I love taking different classes. During grad school, I did a lot of science communication focused. So I took 2 classes that were about science communication. One was a written science communication and one was speaking, like public speaking science communication. And the professor was, she was a tough woman. Like she didn't take any crap from any of her students, but she really taught us how to communicate our science. And it's not as easy as you think. I think you think in your head that you know what you're learning and what you're researching, but when you actually have to talk about it to people that don't know anything about it, it's a practice and it takes a lot of preparing. So I really enjoyed those classes. I really like writing too. So the science writing piece I really liked quite a bit. And then during my undergrad, I took a sustainable technology class. And that just kind of taught me how to use a system approach to thinking and problem solving. And I think that is also really important. So science communication and systems approach to problem solving are 2 courses that I really enjoyed.
I mean, thank you for taking that course, because I'm assuming that's part of the reason why you're here today.
Yeah, I hope I prepared enough in those classes. This is my first podcast guest, being a guest on a podcast. So good practice. And
yeah,
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. And I think so far we're doing pretty good. So we'll move on to our interview today. So before we get started, I do like to, make a few definitions so that, we're all starting from the same place. The first thing I'd like to know is how do you define household management?
Yes. So it's not really something I thought about until getting invited to be on this podcast. And I do a lot of work with University Extension. And historically, this was a group of people that helped relay science to the public. And they focused a lot on home economics, which was something in the past that was really popular. And that's what I initially thought was, household management was home economics, how to clean your house, how to buy your groceries, how to make food. And it is that, but I think it's more than that too. And it kind of goes into what your creature comforts are that you as a person need and what you have to do to get those things and how to manage those things. And also, if you live alone or if you're just a party of one, it might be a little more simple, but then it can be outside of your house too. So it doesn't just have to be in your four walls of your home. It can be your community. It can be your apartment complex. It can be, your family or extended family. I think it's kind of a new term for me, a new topic, but I've been thinking about how it can be, it's not as narrow as it seems, I think, on the surface.
Yeah, definitely. I did interview someone recently about community and how household and community interact. And I'd never thought about it before. And of course, obviously I'm in my home, I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, but I'm also going out into my community and I guess interacting with my community in a way that I'm not doing at work, or maybe I'm not doing in my social circles. I'm composting within my community. So yeah, it's so much broader than I thought. So yeah, I'm also learning. And so today we're going to be talking about, kitchen gardens and herbs. So I guess first of all, what are herbs, and where do we find them? How do we grow them?
Yeah. So I like to start, herbs can be the fresh part of any edible plant, typically like leaves. But I think herbs and spices kind of go hand in hand. And I guess I would say that spices are like the dried herbs, and spices can also be not just leaves, but they can be like seeds or stems or bark. So herbs are a little bit more narrow. It's usually like fresh green leaf material. Sometimes like flowers can be herbs too. But then spices, it's a little bit broader. And growing herbs, very fun, very broad topic. I like growing herbs. I don't grow as many as I'd like, but we just moved to a new house that has full sun in the yard. So I'm hoping to grow a lot more. Yeah.
Great. So that's interesting. So herbs are just the leafy green fresh parts, and then spices are everything else, maybe dried leaves or the seeds or the stems. Okay.
Yeah, you can have dried herbs that maybe aren't spices. I don't know. It gets a little bit hairy to like tease them apart, but I think they both serve the same purpose. They're used to flavor food and for medicinal purposes. And they're pretty much just edible plants that maybe aren't your typical fruit or vegetable. It's like anything that's not a fruit or vegetable, that's an edible plant. And maybe, even sometimes lettuce or spinach can be an herb. So it's like the fresh leafy material, or even like the stems of a chive are an herb. So it can be pretty broad.
I think the thing with, cooking and household things as opposed to science is that sometimes the definitions can get a bit loose, like, tomatoes and cucumbers as vegetables rather than as fruits.
Right. Yeah. Like botanically, they are fruits, but vegetables, they're more in the kitchen. They're a vegetable, and yeah, it's okay to be both.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to put a cucumber and a tomato in a fruit salad.
Right. No, you don't.
Yep. So you've already mentioned a few of the uses of herbs, but do you mind talking a bit more about how herbs can contribute to our meals?
Yes. So I think herbs are really important for like culinary distinction. Like different parts of the world grow different herbs, and they really shape the cuisine that comes from those places. So Italian, you have like your basils and your parsleys and your garlics, and then, Mexican food maybe has more of like cilantro, oregano type things. And that's just the American version of those cuisines. I'm sure in the actual place they might have more variety of herbs. But yeah, I think they really just flavor foods really well, distinguish them from other cultures. I think people that, maybe are reducing their salt intake, if they're not eating a lot of salt in their diet, they can use herbs to make their food more interesting. And I think you can use them for sweet, you can use them for savory. So there's a whole whole lot of utility to herbs, I think.
Mhm. And you also mentioned that they have some medical benefits. And you did mention that, it can help to reduce our salt intake without, I guess, decreasing flavor. But what are some other medical benefits of herbs?
Yes, I don't know if I can really speak to specific things, but I think for me personally, I like to use a herbal tea, a chamomile. I really like chamomile tea. It like helps me calm down after a long day. Um, peppermint tea can like calm my stomach down. Ginger tea has the same effect. I think that you can kind of just try out different things for different applications. Calendula it's kind of an herb. It's more of like a flower, but I've heard that being used for like it's really good for your skin. It's really moisturizing for your skin. Jewelweed is another one that can treat poison ivy if you have it. So if you're interested in medicinal herbs, there's a whole lot of information out there on the internet and in books. I'm not an expert, certainly, but I just like to play around with what I like and what works for me.
Mm-hmm. And so if we are setting up a garden, you're going to be doing this soon, hopefully. What are the things that we're looking to start off with? You mentioned sun, needing enough sun, or like, do we need enough? How much soil do we need? Do you mind walking us through this process?
Yes. So the first thing that I like to talk to people about when they're trying to grow any plant, whether that's herbs or vegetables, fruits, you have to know what your conditions are at your location. So the common phrase for gardeners is right plant, right place. So you have to have the right plant in the right place to be successful. And you can still do that, pick the right plant for the right place, and other things can happen where that might cause some problems. So that's the first thing. You have to know what your conditions are. You have to know what hardiness zone you're in. So I don't know how it's broken down in Australia, but in the United States, it's the USDA hardiness zone map. And I think it's 1 through 11. And each region of the United States is broken down into different zones. And they're based off of temperature and pretty sure it's just temperature, like your coldest and your hottest temperatures throughout the year. So certain herbs will only grow in certain hardiness zones. And beyond the hardiness zones, I mean, even for, you have to just know your conditions. You have to know if it's hot, if it's cold, what the temperature swings throughout the day are. So that's a good place to start, your temperature. And then once you move beyond your temperature, you need to know your sun conditions. So if you're growing in your yard and your backyard only gets morning sun or only afternoon sun, or it gets sun all day, those are different sunlight requirements that different plants will need. So some plants can grow in the shade, no problem. Some plants can grow in the full sun. Some plants really need the full sun to be fruitful or productive. Some plants' watering needs can vary. So it's really important to just know your location, and it's important to know the needs of your plant. And I think for herbs especially, it's important to grow herbs that you like eating. So I don't think if you want to try growing herbs that you don't like eating just because maybe you think that you should, it's good to start with what you like eating.
You bring up really good, I'm listening to you talk about all the things you need to look at before you plant your seeds or get the herbs in. I'm just thinking about my attempt. I think I've broken every rule.
Yeah, that's okay.
I had some seeds. I was like, you know what? I'll put them in the garden. If they work, they work. If they don't, they don't. It's the middle of summer here, so I'm pretty sure some of them cooked the other day. And I'm also growing Italian parsley. I don't like parsley. My partner doesn't like parsley. But I had a packet of seeds.
Yeah, and if it's easy to grow and it sparks your interest in gardening, that's okay too. I think it is important to start with a plan also. Not that it's okay to go to the garden center and just go crazy, but I think having a plan really sets you up for success, because then I know even I do this. I go to the garden center and I just buy things that are not going to work or just I haven't thought about, and it can be fun. But yeah, if you want to be real successful from the start, it's good to have a plan.
I think that I have planned to not be successful, so I'm okay with if it doesn't work, I'm fine with that. I understand it's my fault. And also, I mean, I bought some packet seeds, so they're a bit cheaper than, say, buying a seedling. So I've invested less money into it, I think. So I'm a bit okay if it doesn't work. But that does sort of bring up a question, which is, when you are looking at being successful and, you've planned everything out, you've got the right plants for the right condition, would you recommend buying the seeds and then germinating them, or do you recommend buying seedlings from from your, I forgot what the word is, the horticulture center, the nursery?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what you want to do. My fiance really likes to start things from seed. I'm more of a buy a seedling plug person. I just want to stick it in the soil and have it grow right away. I don't really want to mess with seeds too much. But like you said, seeds are a really affordable option, and they can be really fun for early spring. So if you want to get a jump start on the growing season, you can have a little setup inside. I think where I see the most people, I don't mean to talk all doom and gloom about this, but like the thing I see that fail the most is seedlings not getting enough light. So you really have to provide seedlings with enough light to grow well. And that sometimes a window isn't going to cut it. So I think having like a supplemental grow light is really important. But really, it's just up to your preference. It's fun to just try things too. Sometimes you'll be surprised, and the plants will totally be fine, and you worried about it for no reason. So I worry, but it doesn't always have to be so scary.
Mm-hmm. And so you did mention germinating, but how do you go about that?
Yeah, so you gotta get your seed packet. I think it's good to start with a seed starting mix. So you can go to the garden center and buy a seed starting mix that's specific for germinating seeds and growing seeds into like plugs, is what they're called, like a little cell tray. You're growing plugs. And so you have to have the right mix of the right container. You can use really any container as long as it has some drainage holes in it. So I've seen people use old yogurt containers, or even like wrapping up newspaper into little cups. And you just fill that up with your soil. Different seeds need to be sown at different depths. So like it's kind of, you just have to read the seed packet, really. Usually has all the information that you need on there. So you're sowing depth and you're sowing thickness, or how many seeds you put in each pot will probably be on your packet. And then also you have to keep in mind, if you're going to grow them outside later in the season, how early to start them. So sometimes your seed packet will say start indoors 6 weeks before the last frost. So your last frost in your area you can find online. And where I live in Massachusetts, it's around May 15th. So you really don't want to plant anything that's not cold hardy until after that date. So if you need to start 6 weeks before that date, you're looking at like early April, I believe. So you just got to keep that in mind. You don't want to plant things, you don't want to start them too early because they can get too big or not big enough. So there's a lot to consider, but I think reading the seed packet and starting with your strategy in mind is good.
And so I know that some plants, you were mentioning, you start after or just before the last frost. So I'm guessing like, spring or early spring. Is that the best time to start planning and to start planting?
Yes. So I've heard recently, some people think that the winter is not good for gardening, but it's actually really good for planning your garden because you're not out there doing the work. You can be inside and plan. But yes, I would say typically spring is the time where you want to start your seeds, especially if you live in a more northern area and it doesn't really warm up until end of May. It's good to start sometime in the spring. Sometimes I get eager and I start things in the winter and they just get too big, or it's just too cold in my house and they don't do well. So yes, I think spring typically, April, May are good times to start seeds inside in a northern climate.
Yeah. And what about planting in summer? Because that's what I've done. And as I said, I think that they're getting a little bit, roasted. Is summer a bad time to plant, or you just have to pick the right plants?
It's not a bad time to plant. I think it can be hard for seeds to establish in the summer because it can be so hot and their roots are so small, so they can't really reach the moisture in the soil that they need. So they just dry out a lot faster than a mature full grown plant would. But that being said, I do think summer is a good time to plant larger, more established plants. But you do have to be careful. I think any plant that's growing in a pot can dry out really quickly, or any plant that's not being regularly watered, or your irrigation is malfunctioning, or you're just having a dry spell outside. Summer can be hard because the plants dry out really quickly and easily, depending on the plant. I think some herbs are pretty drought tolerant, but you just gotta watch your moisture of your soil.
Mm-hmm. And so what are some of the, once you've established your plants and they're growing nicely and you're starting to harvest them, how do we keep them growing nicely?
Yes. So I touched on water a little bit. I think if you're growing plants in a pot, it's good to know, water them all the way and then lift up your pot and see how heavy it is. And then that's a good way to measure how much water is in your soil. So if it feels lighter than usual, maybe give it a drink. If it doesn't feel light, you don't need to water it that day, maybe. So I just think keeping an eye on water is a good thing. Weeding can be one of those things that I don't like doing, and I think a lot of gardeners don't like doing, but it does help your plants reach their full potential so they're not competing with other plants in the same area. Fertilizing is something that is sometimes overlooked. And I think it's really important if you want the most productive garden. You can buy an all-purpose fertilizer. It can be organic. It doesn't have to be. And you can fertilize per the instructions on the bag. That can really do a lot to make your garden grow better than maybe it would have otherwise. And then pest management is another problem, like pests like insects. Not all insects are bad. I mean, I've heard people say that if bugs aren't eating your plants, you're not gardening right. So I think bugs are good. It's okay if bugs eat your plants. It's okay if you share your plants with bugs. But I think they can get out of control. So it's just good to keep an eye on them. And if you see a particular pest doing quite a bit of damage, there are ways that you can mitigate bad, losing the plant or being unable to harvest it yourself. So those are the main things, I think: fertilizing, watering, pest control, weeding, and then just, time. I think, pruning, that's another one. Pruning is important, especially for herbs. So if you can't over harvest, because then your plant won't be able to keep growing. So just kind of knowing how fast your plant's growing, and sometimes you over harvest and then it doesn't grow back. So you just got to be careful of that. I know it gets exciting with eating or feeding yourself with food that you grow, but you gotta keep in mind if you want the plant to keep growing, you can't over harvest it.
So I'm not sure if I've been guilty of this. So I'm going to ask you some questions based on my own personal experiences. So I have grown some basil in the past, and I understand you're supposed to cut the top off the basil so that it becomes more bushy and it doesn't get really tall and start to seed. But it just, I don't grow particularly successful basil, so it is only like a few leaves up there, and then I take a few off the side. But I try to leave a few leaves. I try to leave most of the leaves on there and just take a few on the sides so that I get a little bit more in my pesto, say. Is that right? Or should I just wait till I've got better basil plants?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think the best thing about gardening is being able to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. Plants are usually pretty forgiving, especially if you give them enough water and sun. So I think that's a tough one. I mean, I am certainly guilty of that too, where I just want to take it all and use it, or even like I won't take it, and then it goes to seed, and then it's not very good. So I think it's just it's about growing herbs to eat, but it's also just growing plants for fun, so, and plants for the ecosystem, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think it could be both, and just kind of evolve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and maybe grow extra plants so that if you overharvest one, you still have the other ones.
Yeah, exactly. So thickly, and then you can harvest the smaller ones, and then give the other ones more room to grow once you harvest the small ones.
Mm. So, how often should we be pruning our plants?
It definitely depends on the plant. Some like woody herbs like lavender or thyme, they don't really need a lot of pruning at all. Maybe, and as you harvest them through the year to use for food, that's probably good enough for those. For more like softer vegetative herbs, they really only need to be pruned when you're harvesting them. Things like chives can be pruned like all the time, and they still don't really doesn't bother them. They can be pruned pretty aggressively and still come back. And same with mint. Like mint's one of those plants that you can cut it down every other day and it probably would grow back. So it certainly depends on the plant. The woody plants do not need to get pruned as often, but you can shape them if you want them shaped a certain way. Topiary, there's a guy I used to work with at the university that makes rosemary topiaries, and he's got like these really nice, like really, really nice rosemary topiaries. So it really just depends on how you want your woody herbs shaped.
Oh, that'd be lovely when you're doing the shaping, because it would smell so good.
Oh yeah, it smells so good. You walk in the greenhouse and immediately knew that Nick was trimming the rosemary. So yeah, it smells great.
Mm. So by the sounds of it, it does sound like something like a rosemary or a lavender or thyme. And then also chives and mint are maybe a bit easier to take care of because you don't have to worry about pruning, or you don't have to worry about over pruning.
I would say that. Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, would you include these amongst your must-have herbs in your garden?
I would. I mean, I really like a woody herb. I think they're kind of one, like when you like rub on them and they just fill up the air with the scent. I really like that aspect of them. I've never really had that much luck with like cilantro and parsley. I don't know why. They don't seem to. I don't know why. I like a woodier like shrub plant for an herb myself. But I think it's good to have both too. I think it's good to try both. I mean, and then at least where I live, the lavenders and the thymes and rosemaries, they're perennial, so they'll come back every year and kind of stick through the winter. Even like they won't die back completely. Whereas the annual herbs, the more tender basils, cilantros, parsley, they will they're annuals in my climate, so they won't last until the next year.
So you're continually having to, replant them or regrow them.
Yes. You could bring them inside. I've seen some people have luck with bringing them inside, but I think it's easier to just start fresh the next year for those annuals.
And then you don't have to worry about over pruning them too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Are there any other herbs that you'd recommend to anyone who wants to, do some cooking and it's not too hard to grow?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think even foraging for herbs can be really fun. Look up the edible plants in your area and try to go find them. Dandelions, even everywhere, they are edible. You can eat almost every part of a dandelion. Just make sure where you're harvesting them hasn't been, sprayed with chemicals or anything recently. You should be good. Ramps are a wild onion that live in where I live. I think native plants are really fun. There's a lot of native herbs that you can find. Sumac is one that you can harvest. I think I really like herbal teas. So I think if you like growing herbs, or if you like herbal tea, you can kind of experiment with different herbs that will grow well where you live and try those out. I think it's good to start with the the tried and true, like basils and chives, mint. Like if you've never grown an herb before and you want to dip your toes in, I think mint is a really, really good one to start with.
Yep, I've just started growing mint, and because in my old apartment there was a patch of mint that would get scorched every summer, and then a few days later it would spring back up and it would be okay. And so I was like, well, that seems like the plant for me.
Yeah, they're very, very forgiving. And I've even heard people will plant them in a pot in the ground to keep them from taking over the whole garden. So they're known for their robust attitude, and I like that about mint.
So we're going to move on to the practices and habits section. So what is a practice that you do in your own garden to keep it maintained?
Yes. I am kind of I enjoy watering my plants. I grow a lot of potted herbs and potted plants. So I like to keep an eye on watering. So if it's really hot outside and it hasn't rained, I like to go outside and check for water. Sometimes I'll stick my finger like in the top of the soil. And if it's, it's about like, if it's up to your second knuckle and it's dry, it's a good time to water. Or if you lift up the pot and it feels light to you, it's a good time to water. Watering is an easy thing to do, but it can go really wrong if you don't do it enough or if you do it too much. So it's just a good thing to keep your eye on. If you haven't gardened in a long time or you're a new gardener, the most important thing you can do is keep an eye on your water. Forget fertilizer for the first year. Forget about weeding or whatever. Watering is critical.
Okay. So how do you tell if something's been overwatered?
So some plants will tell you really soon if they've got too much water. They get kind of dark green and they look a little like shiny, like their leaves can be like they just look saturated. And sometimes it can cause root problems. So they'll just look unwell. They will kind of wilt. Even usually you think of a plant that's underwatered as wilting, but even plants that are overwatered can wilt too. So, and if you stick your hand in the soil, it's good to feel it. And if it feels muddy or if you water it and nothing comes out of the bottom of the pot, you know that you have a drainage problem. So you really need to keep an eye on drainage if you're growing in containers, or if you're growing in really saturated soil. You gotta just feel the soil, I guess. That's the best way.
Yep. Feel the soil, become one with the soil.
Yeah, get your hands dirty.
And so it does sound like, depending on the time of year, you need to maybe be watering more often. How often should you be maybe checking and making sure that they're okay?
It definitely depends on the temperature. So early spring, even if it hasn't rained in a week and if the temperature is still in the 60s, low 70s, they probably don't need a ton of water. They really need a lot more water when it gets really hot and in like the long, long days of the summer and really clear, a lot of sun. So, early spring, fall, things really start to slow down as far as their water usage. But those July, August, September, where I live, those are like the really critical times to keep an eye on watering. Things can dry out very fast.
So would you check those maybe every day or every second day, once a week?
I would check them every day just because I really enjoy it. It's like part of my wind down after work. Check the plants for water activity. But yes, if you're really busy, if you don't want to go outside that day, I think every other day is fine.
Okay, great. Maybe this is a silly question. So I've got like just a jug that I used to use for drinking water, and now I just use it to water the plants because we don't have a hose. Should I buy a watering can? Is that required, or is what I've got fine?
No, I think what you have is fine. As long as I don't know if I'd use it for years and years, but I would, I think it's perfectly fine. Anything you have to water your plants, I think is good.
Okay. I've been using it for years and years.
I mean, watering cans, you could get a pretty cheap watering can, but I mean, if it's plastic, it's the same thing. So really, I think you're good.
So we're going to answer some questions from the audience today. And just for our listeners, if you are interested in submitting any questions, check our Instagram stories, beginning of the week, say Monday or Tuesday, and we'll post who we're having on that week and what topics. And then you can send us some questions. And so today we've got 2 questions. Our first question is, can you share practical tips on cultivating and caring for herbs in a home garden, especially for those who have limited space or experience?
Certainly. There are really cool containers that you can buy or even make that are stacked. So you can get like a vertical planter situation. So it can have multiple planters in one vertical column. So you can have lots of growing space that will go up instead of out. So if you're on a balcony or you have a small yard and you want to take advantage of every possible spot that you can get a nice vertical planter. I've also seen some really nice planters that are kind of shaped. They're like rectangular and they have like a cutout on the bottom so they can go over a railing. Those are really nice for like a small balcony garden. They fit really perfectly up there and you can grow plants that you want up there. I think the thing you have to watch out for is how big your plant is and how deep the pot is. That's an important thing to consider. So you might, if you have a really limited space or a shallow pot, you might want to grow things that don't have as large of a root system. Another thing you can do is do hanging baskets. I love a hanging basket. You can do tomatoes in a hanging basket. Certain cultivars grow pretty small. A lot of herbs would be great for a hanging basket. There's lots of options for small spaces.
So you mentioned avoiding plants that have, bigger root systems. Do you mind maybe telling us a few which have the bigger root systems to avoid, and then also telling us which are the best ones for small pots?
Yeah, so like we said earlier, mint can get really aggressive and it will outgrow any pot pretty quickly. So that might not be a good one for a small pot. Any of those perennial woody plants that we talked about will need a bigger pot, especially if you want to overwinter them in the pot. I would say nothing smaller than a 2-gallon pot for any of those woody plants that you're going to overwinter. But most other annual herbs you can grow in a pretty small container as long as they're not overcrowded. So I think things like parsley, cilantro, basil, they have pretty shallow root systems and can grow. I would say maybe don't go shallower than like 6 to 8 inches, but that's not bad. You can get, it's pretty good, pretty shallow. So you can do those things in a smaller pot. Chives, I think, are pretty shallow rooted. So if you want to do some chives in a shallow pot, that could work really well.
Chives seem like the way to go. They're pretty hardy to pruning and they have shallow roots.
Yeah, and they are perennials, so they will come back.
Oh, great. Sounds very easy. I've never thought about chives before, to be honest.
Yeah, they're great. You can eat them fresh. You can dry them. They're like, throw them in a salad or, on a steak or whatever you want.
Oh, delicious. And we've got a second question from our audience today. So they ask, how can individuals strategically plan their herb garden to create flavorful combinations that enhance various cuisines and dishes?
So I think if you like to eat worldly cuisines, if you like to be adventurous and try different things, just kind of keep in mind what kind of spices and herbs are used in those cooking recipes, and you can really get creative at your own house with it. So, for example, if you like to eat Italian food, I would recommend growing a basil and a parsley and a mint and chives. You can use all of those, I think, in a lot of Italian dishes. Those certainly aren't the only ones, but I think for us in America, those are the pretty standard Italian flavors. Oregano is really versatile. Like, I've seen a lot of recipes in Mexican food that use oregano, and then also Italian food that use oregano. So oregano is a really good one, really versatile. Lemon balm is another fun one that we haven't really talked about. really good for teas. I've seen it used in a lot of Thai food, even lemongrass too, another one that you can use in Thai food. There are just so many flavorful herbs that you can get really creative with. Then you have like your different herbs, like different parts of the plant can be used for different things. So cilantro is cilantro and it's the leaves. And if you let it go to seed and you harvest the seeds, then you have coriander. So you can really, they're really, really versatile, depending on what you like eating. Look at the ingredients in your favorite foods, favorite dishes, and try it out and, grow multiple different herbs so you can mix and match. I think a good solid herb for really a lot of different cooking would be parsley too. I think parsley is a good garnish for anything, and you can use it on a lot of different cuisines.
Yeah, definitely. I've started looking at fresh herbs at supermarkets are so expensive, and so I just never put them in. But then, my meals aren't nearly as good. So I need to start looking at what I'm always eating and what they always recommend, and then actually growing those, not just forgetting about them.
Yeah, or even sometimes like it's good to substitute things too. So say you have like an old bag of spinach in the bottom of your fridge and your recipe says parsley, but you've only got some old spinach and you chop it up, it looks just like parsley and it adds a little freshness. So you can get creative with your garnish if you really want to use up some greens that you have in the fridge.
And also perfect if you don't like parsley.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for those recommendations. I'll be having a look at my spice cupboard and seeing the ones that are full that I've never touched. I definitely won't be growing those, but the ones that are empty on my shopping list, I'll be growing those hopefully.
Yeah, I believe in you. You could do it.
Yeah, hopefully. And we're going to do the open mic now. So this is a chance for you to talk about something that you're passionate about. And what did you want to talk about today?
So today I think it'd be good to touch on my new job as the invasive species outreach specialist at the University of Connecticut. I recently started this job, so I'm still getting my feet wet and what my role will be. But I'll do a lot of outreach and education about invasive species and mostly plants. So I think sometimes you think of invasive species like we were talking about the cane toads in Australia earlier. But also plants can be a real problem. And I'll be focusing a lot on aquatic invasive plants. So like not seaweeds necessarily, but kind of what you think of as seaweeds when you're in like a lake. Like if it's covered in aquatic weeds, they can be really bad for the water body and for recreation. So learning how to manage them it's unlikely that they're going to be fully eradicated, but managing them sustainably is what I'm really interested in.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you go about, I guess, managing them efficiently? Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately, a lot of the times you have to use herbicides, which can be overused, I think. And for a lot of the aquatic plants, they really do require a lot of permitting. You have to get special permits to use herbicides in water bodies. So I'm glad that there's those, hurdles to get through to you're not just dumping chemicals in the water, but mostly herbicides. You can also use mechanical removal. So there's like big rakes that will get pulled on boats that can be used. They have to be repeated pretty frequently. One that's really cool that I would like to learn more about for specific plants are biocontrols. So I know more about this for greenhouses. Greenhouse pests, you can release different insects to control other insects. And you have to repeatedly release them, but they will prey on the pest. So there are certain things that you can release, say in a pond that has a bad aquatic weed problem that will eat the weed. So it's not adding any chemicals. But I think you have to be careful with those things too, because if they're not specific to the plant, they can be a real problem.
I mean, it does bring to mind, as you were saying before, with the cane toads, where they just release this thing they thought would, take care of the problem, it actually became much more of a problem. So how do you, I guess, stop the things that are eating the pests becoming a bigger pest?
A lot of research goes into those things nowadays. I think in the past, it was like, oh, this thing will definitely work. We had not checked it. We're just going to put it out there and see what happens. But these days, we've learned enough from our mistakes to know that these things really need to get vetted and tested. And usually they start in laboratory testing, like very controlled environments. And then there'll be like test sites out in the wild where you will see if it's actually effective. And just because something works in the laboratory doesn't mean it's going to work out in the wild. So lots and lots of testing, lots of time. It takes years for biocontrols to get vetted these days.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear because, it's a great idea, I think, in theory, because, like releasing pesticides or herbicides into a pond, what I imagine is going to damage other things in the pond, not just the thing you're targeting. If you can, get something that's a bit more natural, great. Yeah.
I agree. And I think another thing in that same vein is a lot of the times I see this happening where people will use a ton of herbicides and manage the problem weed, but they won't revegetate the area with native plants. So you're kind of just leaving this niche open for more invasive plants to come in. So you have to revegetate, you have to reseed. It's complicated and it takes a long time, but you can't just remove the weed and expect it to go away because it just doesn't.
That actually makes a lot of sense. If you have to kill something and then replace it with something else.
Yes. That's what I'm trying to learn more about and have outreach events and things like that. That's what I'd like to focus on, native plants.
Yeah, great. And so what kind of work are you going to be doing with the public?
Yeah, so just the other week I went to Nursery and Landscapers Association. So a lot of invasive plants come from the ornamental nursery trade. So what makes a good nursery plant also makes a good invasive plant sometimes. So really reaching different audiences that you wouldn't think will be something I do a lot. So working with nurseries, but also working with land managers, working with people that own a lot of land. I think I heard somewhere that most of the land east of the Mississippi River, which is where I live, most of that is privately held land. So you don't really have the large government bodies managing the land. So, the general public is the landowners, the land managers. So just reaching anybody that has land, if they have half an acre, if they have 10 acres, if they have 50 acres, it's just going to be a diverse group of people that I'll be doing outreach events for at different events, different conferences, even just different like workshops, probably some like site visits like at the river or at the pond or field days, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess just encouraging them to plant things that aren't going to be invasive or that are native to the area, rather than something that just because it looks pretty doesn't mean that it's going to be good for the environment.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really interested in that and trying to convince people that you can still buy really pretty native plants and it's just like an added benefit that they look pretty, but you can really, it's okay to focus your gardening on, the ecosystem rather than just, blues all summer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your work. It sounds like, still learning, but very important, very interesting work. So yeah, congratulations again and good luck with your new job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And if our listeners want to find out more about you and your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So I think the link will be provided. I can also you can shoot me an email. It's my first period last name at UConn.edu. So first, last at UConn.edu. If you want to send me an email. I'm not really on X or anything like that. So that's about it. LinkedIn and email for me.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll put those both in the show notes so everyone can find you. Thank you so much for talking to me today. You've been listening to On the House, produced by the Household Management Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at hm.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Joustra. Thanks for tuning in.